Good evening. There's something I want you to consider tonight. Not argue about, not defend or dismiss, just consider. And I think if you sit with it honestly for a few minutes, it might change the way you walk into tomorrow morning. Here it is, everything you've ever accomplished and everything you've ever failed to accomplish has had one common thread running through it. Not talent, not timing, not luck, though we love to credit luck when things go well and blame it when they don't. No, the common thread is something quieter than that. Something so close to you that you've probably stopped noticing it entirely. It's the attitude you carried into each situation. Now, I know what you might be thinking. That sounds like something they stitch onto a pillow. And I understand the skepticism. We've all heard the word attitude tossed around so casually that it's lost its edges. But bear with me tonight, because what I want to talk about isn't the bumper sticker version of a positive mental attitude. I want to talk about the real thing, the kind that holds up when the bill comes due, when the diagnosis arrives, when the business stumbles, when someone you trusted lets you down. The kind that doesn't crack. That kind of attitude isn't an accident, and it isn't a gift reserved for a lucky few. It's a discipline, and like any discipline worth having, it begins not with a shout, but with a choice. Let me tell you about a man I'll call Walter. Walter owned a small hardware store in a mid-sized town. The kind of store that smelled of sawdust and linseed oil, where the floorboards creaked and the fellow behind the counter knew your name. He'd built it over 22 years, and he was proud of it, the way a man is proud of something he made with his own hands. Then a large chain store opened 6 blocks away. One of those enormous places with 50 employees and prices Walter simply couldn't match. His suppliers watched. His customers drifted. His son, who worked the counter on weekends, quietly suggested that maybe it was time to think about closing. Walter didn't close. Now, I want to be careful here, because what Walter did next wasn't magic. He didn't discover some secret formula. He didn't suddenly become someone else. What he did was this. He sat down one Sunday morning with a cup of coffee gone cold, and he made a decision. Not a business decision, a mental one. He decided that he was going to approach every single day as if it were the first day of possibility, not the last day of hope. He started arriving earlier. Not because the book said so, because he wanted to. He began writing personal notes to longtime customers, actual letters, handwritten, short, and sincere. He learned which customers were building decks or fixing leaky faucets, and he'd set aside the exact hardware they'd need before they even walked in. He hosted Saturday morning workshops in the store. Free, practical, useful, teaching people how to fix the things they were afraid to break further. And something shifted. Not overnight, over months. Slowly, a loyal group of customers came back, and then expanded, and then started sending their neighbors. Not because Walter's prices were lower. They weren't. But because Walter's attitude created something the big store couldn't manufacture on any assembly line. The feeling that someone genuinely cared. Walter didn't save his store with capital or connections or some clever marketing scheme. He saved it with the decision, made fresh every single morning, to believe that the day ahead held something worth showing up for. The attitude came first. Everything else followed. Now here's what I want you to take from that story. A positive mental attitude is not optimism in the blind sense. It's not pretending the chain store isn't there. It's not dancing around difficulty with a smile glued on. Walter knew the threat was real. He didn't pretend otherwise. What Walter understood, and what most people never quite grasp, is this. Your attitude is the one variable in any situation that belongs entirely to you. The economy, the competition, the weather, the health of your knees, these things happen to you. But your attitude, that's yours. No one can tax it. No one can steal it. And no one can give it to you either. William James, the great American philosopher, said it as plainly as anyone ever has. He said that the greatest discovery of his generation was that human beings can alter their lives by altering their attitude of mind. That was written well over 100 years ago, and it's still the most underused piece of wisdom in circulation. Here's the thing about attitude that most people miss. They treat it like a thermometer, something that simply reflects the temperature of the surrounding conditions. When things are good, the attitude rises. When things go cold, the attitude drops. And they consider this perfectly natural. They're waiting, you see, waiting for conditions to improve so that their attitude can improve. Winners reverse this. They use their attitude like a thermostat, something that sets the temperature rather than merely measuring it. They decide in advance what kind of mental climate they intend to live in. And then they hold to that decision even when the winds are blowing the wrong direction. This is not easy. I'll never insult you by suggesting it is. But it is simple, and there is a significant difference between easy and simple. A positive mental attitude, in its truest form, is the daily, quiet, unglamorous practice of choosing to believe, before the evidence is in, that your effort is meaningful, that the situation is workable, and that you are equal to whatever today requires of you. Not superior to it, not immune to it, equal to it. That is the foundation. Everything else, the energy, the creativity, the persistence, the resilience that people admire in those rare individuals who seem to move through life with some invisible advantage, all of it is downstream from that single commitment. And now, just a moment for this message. Your attitude isn't a reflection of your circumstances. It is the compass that determines which direction your circumstances will eventually move. Now I'd like to talk about how you actually build this, because it's one thing to be inspired by Walter's story on a Sunday evening, and another thing entirely to walk into your own Monday morning with something real in your hands. The first thing to understand is that an unbreakable positive mental attitude is not constructed in moments of crisis. It's built in the mornings nobody sees. It's built in the habit of what you feed your mind in the first hour of the day, before the telephone rings and the world begins its familiar chorus of demands and disappointments. Think of your mind the way you think of a garden. A garden doesn't care whether you plant wheat or weeds. Whatever you put in, it will grow with complete impartiality and loyalty. Your mind operates on the same principle. If the first thing you do each morning is rehearse your worries, confirm your grievances, and remind yourself of everything that is going wrong, your mind will grow that garden with absolute faithfulness. It is not being cruel to you. It's being cooperative. It's giving you exactly what you've asked for. But here is the astonishing thing. It works just as faithfully in the other direction. If you spend that first quiet hour, or even just the first 15 minutes, deliberately directing your thoughts toward what is possible, toward what you're grateful for, toward the person you intend to be today, your mind will begin to organize itself around those things instead. You'll start noticing opportunities you were walking past. You'll find reserves of patience you didn't know were there. You'll respond to difficulty with a steadiness that surprises even you. This isn't mysticism. This is just how the instrument works. The second thing is this. Watch what you say about yourself when no one is listening. The sentences we repeat internally, the little running commentary we keep about our own abilities, our own worth, our own chances, these sentences are more powerful than any outside opinion. A man can have 1,000 people cheering for him, but if the voice in his own head is quietly insisting he doesn't deserve it, he'll find a way to prove that voice right. And a man can have the world lined up against him, but if his internal voice says, "I will find a way," he'll find one. Probably not the way he expected, but a way. The great achievers in every field, and I've spent a great many years studying them, in business, in science, in the arts, in public service, share this characteristic above almost all others. They hold a private conversation with themselves that is fundamentally constructive, not falsely cheerful, not loud, but patient and steady and quietly, persistently on their own side. You can develop this. You can, if you choose, begin today to monitor those internal sentences and, gently but firmly, redirect the ones that are working against you. Not by shouting them down, but by replacing them the way you'd replace a worn-out part with something that actually fits and functions. And the third thing, and perhaps the most important, is this: associate. As often as you can manage it, with people who carry the kind of attitude you want to develop. This is not about avoiding the hard realities of life or surrounding yourself only with cheerful personalities. It's about recognizing that attitude, like a cold, is genuinely contagious. The people you spend your hours with will either lift the level of your thinking or lower it. And they do this so gradually, so quietly, that you often don't notice it happening until years have passed, and you look around and wonder how you arrived where you are. Choose carefully. And when you can't choose your company, choose what you read, what you listen to, what stories you fill your imagination with. The mind is always being shaped by something. The question is only whether you are the one doing the shaping. There is a shadow that follows most people through their entire lives. And the remarkable thing, the almost unbearable thing, when you finally see it, is that they never turn around to look at it. They sense it. They feel its presence in the tightening of the chest on a Sunday evening, in the hollow silence before an important meeting, in the quiet dread that settles in when they imagine, honestly, what the next 10 years might look like if nothing changes. It is the gnawing suspicion that something enormous is working against them, that the cards were dealt unfairly, that other people, those people, the ones who seem to move through life with an ease that feels almost indecent, were simply handed something they weren't, and so they shrink, not dramatically, not all at once. They shrink the way a fire shrinks when nobody tends to it, gradually, almost imperceptibly, until one day there's nothing left but a few warm embers and the memory of what the flame used to look like. They hold back in meetings. They don't send the letter. They talk themselves out of the conversation, the venture, the risk, and they do it so quietly, so efficiently, that they've convinced themselves the decision was reasonable, prudent even. They stand at the edge of their own lives with their hands in their pockets, telling themselves they're simply being patient, waiting for the right moment, waiting for the conditions to align, waiting for some external signal that it's safe to begin. Here is what I want you to understand about that posture. The right moment is not coming, not because life is cruel, but because the right moment is never found. It is always made. And it is made by one thing, and one thing only: the quality of the attitude you carry into whatever moment you're standing in right now. Your attitude is not a passenger in your life. It is the driver. Every thought you permit to take up residence in your mind is casting a vote for the kind of person you are becoming. Every morning you wake up and allow the world to set the tone before you do, you have surrendered the most valuable piece of real estate you will ever own. And you have surrendered it for free. But here is what ought to stop you cold, in the best possible sense. Of all the things in your life that lie beyond your control, and there are many, your attitude is not among them. The economy can turn. The weather doesn't consult you. People will disappoint you without apology. But the lens through which you interpret all of it, the fundamental posture you bring to this day, that belongs to you with an absoluteness that nothing in the world can revoke. Nobody can legislate it away. No circumstance, however difficult, can take it without your permission. That is not a small thing. That is everything. Most people wake up every morning and hand the day a blank check. They open their eyes, and before a single conscious thought has had time to settle, the world rushes in. The noise, the obligations, the unfinished arguments, the bills on the counter, the news on the radio, the neighbor's dog, the weather. And somewhere in that first tumbling avalanche of sensation, the day's emotional temperature gets set, not by the person living the day, but by whatever happened to arrive first. They didn't choose it. They didn't even notice it happening. And by 8 o'clock in the morning, they are already living inside a mood that belongs to someone or something else entirely. They call this being realistic. They call it responding to life as it is. What they don't realize is that they've already lost the most important contest of the day before they've laced up their shoes, and so they move through their hours in a kind of perpetual reaction, braced, tensed against whatever comes next, telling themselves that once things settle, once the pressure eases, once the season turns or the raise comes through or the kids grow up a little, then they'll feel better. Then the attitude will improve. They treat a positive state of mind the way a man treats a clear sky, something that simply happens on good days and disappears on bad ones, something you're grateful for when it appears and helpless at about when it doesn't. They are passengers in their own mental lives, and they've been riding in the back seat for so long that they've forgotten there's a steering wheel. Now, let me tell you what a positive mental attitude actually is, because I think it has been misrepresented badly. It is not a feeling. Feelings are weather. They come and they go, and any man who builds his life around the reliable arrival of good feelings is building on sand. A positive mental attitude is a posture. It is a settled, pre-made determination about how you intend to meet whatever the day produces, made not after you see what the day holds, but before. It is the alarm clock going off, and, in that first unguarded moment, choosing deliberately, quietly, without ceremony, to approach the next 16 hours as a person who expects to find something workable in them. Not perfect, workable. This is a decision, a renewable one, made fresh each morning. And the extraordinary thing, the thing that ought to genuinely move you, is that this decision costs nothing. No capital, no credentials, no permission from anyone. It requires only the recognition that the steering wheel exists and the willingness to reach for it before the world does. The day is going to be shaped by something. Let it be you. There is a conversation happening inside you right now that you did not schedule and cannot silence. It began before you were old enough to have any say in it. And over the years, through every disappointment absorbed, every criticism that landed harder than it should have, every time you reached for something and came back empty-handed, it developed a particular tone, a lean, a default direction it tends to drift when nothing is actively steering it elsewhere. For most people, that direction is inward and downward, not because they are weak, not because they are damaged beyond repair, but because the mind, left entirely to its own devices, does what any untended thing does. It gravitates toward the familiar. And for most of us, worry is more familiar than wonder. Doubt is a more practiced habit than confidence. The mind has simply been rehearsing the wrong material for so long that it's forgotten it ever had a choice in the repertoire. And here is the quiet devastation of that. The person who dwells, day after day, on what might go wrong, who replays the failures before the attempt is even made, who auditions the rejection before the ask is spoken, that person is not being cautious. They are being shaped, sculpted slowly and without their knowledge, into someone who will find it harder and harder to believe that the outcome could be different. They tell themselves they'll feel more confident once they have more evidence, once they've seen it work, once the doubt dissolves on its own. They're standing in a garden, watering weeds, and wondering why the flowers never come. Now, here is something that ought to reorganize the way you think about your own mind entirely. The mind does not evaluate the quality of what it receives. It does not distinguish between what is worthy of your attention and what is not. It simply, and with breathtaking loyalty, moves in the direction of whatever you feed it most consistently and most emotionally. This is not a poetic notion. It is closer to a mechanical one. The mind is an instrument of extraordinary precision and zero moral judgment. It will serve your highest aspirations with the same faithful obedience it gives your deepest dreads. It does not care which one you choose, but you must choose. Because if you don't, the accumulated weight of accident, habit, and outside noise will choose for you, and it will not choose well. Feed this instrument excellence. Feed it the image of the person you are capable of becoming. Feed it, daily, deliberately, without apology, the evidence that what you want is not only possible, but reasonable. Do this with enough consistency, and something almost startling will begin to occur. The mind will stop resisting the idea of your own potential and start organizing itself around it instead. It was always going to move towards something. Now at last, you are the one deciding what. There is a trap so elegantly constructed, so perfectly disguised as common sense, that millions of intelligent, capable, well-meaning people walk straight into it every single day without the faintest suspicion that anything has gone wrong. It goes like this. The world looks difficult, and it often is. The circumstances are discouraging, and they sometimes genuinely are. The conditions are not what you'd have chosen. The timing is off. The resources are thin. The wind is blowing sideways. And so the reasonable-seeming conclusion arrives, quiet and persuasive, and dressed in the language of wisdom. Not yet. Get the conditions right first. Stabilize the ground before you build. Wait until the storm passes, until the market settles, until the children are older, until the debt is smaller, until something out there shifts into a more favorable arrangement. And then you'll bring your best thinking. Then you'll engage fully. Then the attitude will follow naturally, because it will finally have something solid to stand on. It sounds measured. It sounds responsible. And it is, in fact, one of the most expensive mistakes a human being can make, because the years pass. That is what years do, with or without your participation. And the conditions, this will astonish no one who has lived long enough. The conditions have a stubborn habit of not improving on their own. Not because life is rigged against you, but because conditions respond to people who act upon them, not to people who are waiting for them to change first. The man who stands at the shoreline, waiting for the water to calm before he learns to swim, will stand there a long time. The water was never going to calm. That was never the arrangement. Here is the principle, and I want you to hear it as plainly as I can say it. Thinking precedes condition, always, without exception. The outer world of a person's life is, over time, a remarkably faithful reproduction of their inner world of thought. Not instantly, nothing honest happens instantly, but with a consistency that, once you've seen it clearly, you cannot unsee. The man who thinks in the language of scarcity will find scarcity waiting to confirm him at every turn. The man who thinks in the language of possibility does not find a world without obstacles. He finds the same obstacles and moves through them differently. His thinking reorganizes his perception reorganizes his behavior, and his behavior, accumulated over months and years, reorganizes his circumstances. This is the reversal that changes everything. You do not wait for the life to improve so the thinking can improve. You improve the thinking now, today, in whatever conditions are currently on the table. And you allow the thinking to go to work on the life. The conditions were always downstream. The mind was always the source. We have been sold a story about strength, and I'm afraid it has done us a great disservice. The story goes something like this. Somewhere out there, in the biography you read, in the speech you heard, in the documentary that moved you, there is a moment. A singular, luminous, dramatic moment where a person of extraordinary character rises to meet an extraordinary challenge, and in that rising reveals who they truly are. We watch it, we are stirred by it, and then quietly we draw the wrong conclusion. We conclude that what we witnessed was the creation of something, that the crisis built the character, that the pressure produced the resolve, that the extraordinary moment manufactured the extraordinary person. And so we wait, half-consciously, for our own defining moment to arrive. We imagine that when the great test comes, when our version of that scene presents itself, something will rise in us too, something adequate, something that wasn't there before but will somehow appear when the stakes are high enough and the audience is large enough and the moment is dramatic enough to call it forth. This is one of the most quietly damaging beliefs a person can carry, because the defining moment does not build the person. It merely reveals what was already there. And if nothing was built beforehand, if the mornings were squandered, if the private hours were surrendered without intention, if the attitude was treated as something to be summoned on demand rather than cultivated in advance, then the moment arrives and finds nothing solid to stand on. The crisis comes, as crises always do, and the person who is waiting for it to make them strong discovers, to their private devastation, that it cannot. Here is the truth that the biographies don't linger on long enough, because it isn't dramatic enough to hold a crowd. The unbreakable attitude is assembled in secret. It is built in the mornings that look like every other morning, when the alarm sounds and the room is dark and nobody is keeping score, and there is no particular reason on the surface of things to bring anything more than the minimum. It is built in the decision, made quietly and without applause, to think with discipline when thinking carelessly would be easier, to hold the standard when lowering it would cost nothing visible, to show up fully, intentionally, with genuine belief in the value of the effort, when showing up halfway would go entirely unnoticed by everyone except the one person who matters most in this accounting. That person is you. And here is what ought to steady you completely and permanently about that truth. You do not need a stage. You do not need an audience or a crisis or a perfect set of conditions to begin building the thing that will carry you through every imperfect condition you will ever face. You need only this morning and the one that follows, and the quiet, private, irreplaceable decision to bring yourself, all of yourself, to both. That is how it is built. That is how it has always been built. One unglamorous morning at a time. So here's what I'd like to leave with you tonight. One thing, just one. For the next 30 days, that's all I'm asking. 30 days, try this. Every morning, before you do anything else, before you read the paper or pour the coffee or begin the familiar forward rush of the day, take 5 minutes, just 5. Sit quietly and ask yourself one question. Ask yourself, what kind of person do I intend to be today? Not what you intend to accomplish, not what's on the list. Who do you intend to be? Patient, persistent, generous in your assessment of others, steady in the face of what doesn't go your way. Write it down if you can. One sentence, something specific enough to actually mean something. Not I will be positive. That's too vague to grip. Something like, today, when something goes wrong, I will pause before I react. Or, today, I will give someone the benefit of the doubt before assuming the worst. Something small enough to actually practice, give it some thought. And then, at the end of the day, ask yourself whether you managed it. Not to punish yourself if you didn't, but to notice, to pay attention. Because self-knowledge, the honest, unglamorous, daily variety, is the beginning of every lasting change. 30 days. That's all. You have 30 days to spare, and what you might find on the other side of them is something that will serve you for the rest of your life. The world will give you plenty of reasons to think small. What the world will never give you, unless you build it yourself, is the unshakable conviction that you are meant for more than the version of yourself you settled for yesterday. Good night and good thinking.